Welcome to episode 4 of Soundwaves, the podcast of the Ellen MacArthur Cancer Trust. This is a place to share stories where we will go behind the scenes, and it's a chance to stay in touch with everyone who has a relationship with the trust. This episode is going out at the start of the Mental Health Foundation's Mental Health Awareness Week here in the UK. The Foundation's chief exec, Mark Rowland, said it could be the most important week the Foundation have hosted, given everything going on in the world at the moment. And the theme for this year is kindness. Here to discuss mental health this week, we have Macy, a volunteer who also experienced the trust as a young person. We have trust skipper Richard, and we have mental health first aid instructor Susie. Susie, you have a history working with young people and cancer. Can you tell us a bit about that and why a focus on mental health for those young people is important?
Yeah, I think that I've spent the last 25 years working within the NHS and charity sector, and a lot of that was working with young people with cancer and their families. And my history was very much starting off as one of the Teenage Cancer Trust Youth Support coordinators, and it was an amazing role, and it taught me so much. All the young people and the families that I worked with really taught me a lot. And essentially, I think I look at that was very much, it's a role that is very much supporting the mental health of young people as they go through their cancer experience, and alongside that working with families, whether they're siblings, their peer group, um, and it's a really important thing that we do talk about. I think that for many years we didn't have the label of mental health. I think that I think we're very much in a new generation or a new world where people are starting to say the words mental health out loud. I compare it a little bit to where cancer was 20 years ago. And 20 years ago, no one wanted to say the word cancer out loud, so we called it the C word. I mean, God, 25 years ago, I was in Great Ormond Street Hospital, and I would have parents saying to me, "Don't say the word cancer. Don't tell my child they've got cancer." And even back then, 20 years ago, I knew I very much came from a world of, actually, let's be truthful, let's say the real words. If we say the real words, we're not hiding things. People can learn and people can feel comfortable, and people shouldn't be ashamed if they have cancer. It's something, it's real, it's happening. And in very much the same way with mental health, we all have mental health, and we should be loud and proud to talk about our mental health and to say it out loud. And I think we're very much part of this movement now of talking about mental health and accepting it. And I think when I reflect back of my time of working with young people with cancer, I think in my new role now as very much a mental health first aid instructor, and training people around and around understanding mental health, and in particular looking at young people. We know that mental health exists, like we just said, we've got it, but in particular, mental health in young people, it's huge, it's massive. It's a time where hormones are going off all over the place. We live in a world now where, social media is putting a lot of pressure on our body image and how we look, and we don't want to be burdens to our families, and we're growing independence, and all these things are just happening for every adolescent in the world. And it's hard. We've got the chemicals in our brain are changing. It's tough being an adolescent. I mean, I can remember being an adolescent. Some of it was joyful, some of it I've put it in a box and I don't go back to it. And my mother certainly wouldn't go back to it. But it was a learning curve, because as well as it as adolescence, that's that risk behaviour coming in. It's hard work being an adolescent. And I think you then throw a diagnosis of cancer in there, and it just makes all of those things 10 times bigger, a lot harder to deal with. And I think I spent my whole career saying to young people when I first met them at diagnosis, I would say to them and their families, there isn't a rule book on cancer, that everyone's cancer experience is going to be different, and that is okay. You own it. You own the way that you are going to deal with this. And again, be proud of it. And some days there'll be bad days and rubbish days, and other days you'll take on the world and you'll be amazing, and every single day is okay because it's yours and you own it. And I put that exactly to the same with mental health. There isn't a rule book on mental health. we all have our own stories, our own experiences, and definitely when it comes to mental health and young people with cancer, we need to be talking about this. We need to be supporting them, and we need to be saying it's okay, it's all right, it's yours, you own it, and go with it. And it's going to be a crazy journey as you go on it, but there will be brilliant people around who will support you, and it's okay, just keep talking about it.
Can I bring you in here, Richard, and talk about being a skipper who's been on a lot of trust trips now? What kind of mental health considerations are at the front of your mind when you're with young people on a yacht?
I think that's a really good question, because listening to what Susie was saying is that as skippers, the one thing I found out is that we never knew or really knew the journey of the young person up to the point of them getting on the boat. So it's kind of us coming in quite blindsided and being part of a wider team as part of the trust. We know there's lots of stuff going on. But actually, when you're just presented on the day with a child or young person, we don't know what they're bringing with them. So we can look at diagnosis of treatment, no problem at all. But as Susie alludes to, nobody knows the mindset of any young person that turns up. So the considerations we kind of look for is that all the skippers would probably say the same things, is that we want to try and create a footprint for them, that when they step aboard, whether it be a residential, whether it be a canal trip, whether anything else that goes on, is that whoever steps aboard any one of our boats or the bits that we're in, is that if opportunity, and it does happen on these trips, that there's a dropout comment by the young person simply because they're in an environment that isn't like they've ever had before, they feel comfortable about something, or as Susie quite says, or they feel angry about something, you know what, that's cool. It doesn't faze us. Our job is to keep everyone safe. But when we hear those comments, it's really being alert to saying, right, what is it that clearly you're anxious about? So a child or young person that's not sleeping, could be many, many things. But if during the context is that if someone's more quiet than not, then maybe we'll probably have a look just to see, are you all right? Are you sure you're all right? And then after a while, you probably may say something that's just really interesting. Sometimes we have great conversations where we'll sit back and listen to them talk about their treatment and diagnosis, but sometimes we have a dropout comment which is out of context, nothing to do with their treatment. It's about how they're feeling about how the dynamic of their family is. For instance, that mum and dad aren't getting on, and yet actually they've never been able to talk about that. Well, if that's the one bit that we try and achieve together, great. So what I think I try and do, and a lot of other skippers try and do, is that in that moment, we'll try and give them a short-term coping strategy. And, echoing what Susie says, it's the basics of, it's all right. It's all right to feel like that. Okay, guess what? I might appear as a skipper that's, larger than life and everything else, but guess what? I have rubbish days too. And that's all right. And sometimes hearing that from someone totally that they don't know, totally out of context, suddenly, because it's not mum and dad, it's not their nurse, it's not a social worker, it's not anyone, it's a safe place to say something. And then we just give them a short-term coping strategy to do that. What we look to do is, for me, it's behaviour. I'm quite good at making a fool of myself, but I've been doing it all my life. But I know what I'm doing, and I'm trying to make sure that everyone that leaves the boat either learns a bit about dad dancing or but in creating that ridiculousness, often we find another opportunity that somebody says, right, the question I always leave people with is to say, right, who do you want to talk to after this? Because we know that our journey with them is maybe 2 or 3 days. Residentials could be the same thing. We often get dropout comments maybe the last day because they know what's coming next and they just want to get it out there. Training wise, well, we don't have a whole lot of training. I'm lucky I've got quite a big background in it, but actually it doesn't really matter. What matters is that they've picked you. And if they pick you, then it's super important. They've picked you for a reason. And it shows that you're confident and have something to say back that actually you can move back to them. And that's where the kind of elongated kind of trust tribe family that we're all part of then gives them a coping strategy, because we don't want it to be said once and then they never say it again, because we know how precious that moment of lucidity for them is and what we can do back. That's only my experience. There we are.
Macy, you've kind of experienced both sides of that dynamic where you've been a young person on a trip with the trust and also a volunteer. What kind of insight does that give you? What do you think are the most important things to keep in mind as a volunteer?
So I think for me, like you said, I've been in a way quite lucky to experience both sides of the trust. I've been as a young person with them for 7 years, and I done my first lot of grad volunteering last year. So I think you've got to really keep in mind that as a grad volunteer, you have been on that other side. You've experienced cancer yourself. You've gone through the highs and lows of it, and it's true, like they said, when cancer treatment stops, cancer never goes away. It's going to be something with you for the rest of your life. And I've experienced that massively. Like, I've got so many after effects from it. And I would say my mental health side of it didn't really kick in when I was going through treatment, because I was between 6 and 8. It really hit me when I went into secondary school, and I'd missed all that social stuff beforehand. And even now, even though I'm in uni, that's still hitting me now, that there's certain things that when you're younger, it does impact as you grow up. You miss some vital parts of life. But I think when you're on a trip and when you go as a volunteer, it's so well known that if you are having a down day, it's okay to go speak to your skipper or even someone else on another boat who you may already have that relationship with. Because if you don't feel mentally okay, how are you meant to be there for the young people on the boat? But I also think when I done my first trip last year, for me it was being very open with the young people about my experience and what I've gone through and what I'm going through now. Because I feel like for a lot of people, from like medical professionals, it's painted out, but when treatment finishes, you can go back to your normal life. And I'm 11 years on, and my life hasn't turned back to normal what it was before treatment. And in a way, I don't want to paint that cloud that it's all going to be okay, it's all going to be like that. I want to paint for them that it's okay to have bad days about it. It's okay to get upset. It's okay to get angry. You can cry, but then you can also smile about it and have a laugh about it, because in all of it, there's still good days. There's still so many memories I've got from it. And in a way, without even going through that, I wouldn't have had the trust there. And that in itself is a massive help, that it surrounds us as young people who have gone through it, who you don't come across in like school, many people who have gone through what you've gone through at whatever age you go through that stage of treatment. But it gives you that community of that actually you're not alone anymore. You've got other people to talk to. And I think just that in itself alleviates a little bit of that mental health side, that you're no longer feeling alone or isolated, and that like Susie said earlier, that's that dirty word. It no longer is. You can say it and no one looks at you in a funny way. But so for me, I think the only thing I can really say as a grad volunteer is putting your experience out there, because I feel like if you put that out to young people, it will make them feel a lot more comfortable to come and talk to you, even if you necessarily haven't had the same cancer or the same experience. It just gives them that someone to go to and go, actually, no, you're the same as me, and look, you're this many years on, and there is a little bit of life after treatment, because that's what I got from the grad volunteers when I was going through it.
And do you recognise the kind of things that Richard was talking about, where it comes from having someone to talk to on a trip when you were a young person yourself, or is it to do with the volunteers who are there, the skippers who are there, or is it the dad dancing that just makes folk feel more relaxed? Is it all of that together? You know, what does it feel like to be on a trip where you can just talk about whatever it is you want to talk about or not talk about?
For me, like every single year, even though, like I said, I'm 11 years on, it's that 1 week where I can just be who I am. I can be free. I can, if I want to bring up cancer, I can bring it up. If I want to talk my past experience or how it's affecting me now, I can. But if I just want to be a fool and play games and chat about rubbish with whoever on the boat, I can do that, and no one looks at me any differently. If 1 second I'm talking about cancer and the next I've gone back to talking about what we class as real life.
I think it's a really good point, Macy. I just want to echo that, is that regardless, on the one skill I think that we all try and give everyone, as you've seen, is that I often find some people don't want to participate overtly in team sports. That's cool. I can't tell you the amount of times that I've either been drawn on or tattooed or something, where the artistic side of individuals come out, the quieter ones that actually want to express themselves. And that's really important point that I think you make, is anyone's watching this or listening to this, is that we totally get that bit. And if anyone's the young person's watching, they think, oh, that'll never be me and I'll never be able to articulate how I am. We've got many, many ways of getting you to express yourself and find your groove. Photography, I can remember one young person that didn't interact because she felt she wasn't confident enough to, but we gave her the camera and she became our trust camera person for the week. Just 1 minute, nothing, next minute, hat on back to front, taking all these action shots, and suddenly left with what we need to do. And what you're saying there is exactly right, is that there is something for everyone. It's just a question of us finding that one thing and just making it happen. And we can, and people shouldn't be afraid of that bit.
At our Birmingham volunteer training and update day earlier than this year, we had this excellent session on mental health, and Susie, you delivered this really great mental health training to the Trust staff a few weeks ago. And one of the things that keeps coming up is the idea of the stress bucket. The idea is that your bucket fills up with anxieties and worries, which contributes to poorer mental health. But then you do things to empty it out, which have a benefit to your mental health. It was pretty clear how everyone in the room had their own ideas of what helped empty their bucket. So I thought it'd be a good idea to ask each of you what kind of things you do to pour those anxieties away. And particularly during lockdown right now, what kind of things it is you're doing that help keep your spirits up when things are a bit strange in the world. So if I could start with you, Macy, what kind of things do you feel pour away your stresses?
So for me, like, lockdown's been a bit weird actually, because just before the training day in Birmingham, I'd got the news that I might have relapsed. So I was going through all of that, and luckily I haven't. I've just got other problems which stem from the treatment when I was younger. But it's sort of given me that time I need to, like, just be at home and actually process everything. So I feel like if I was still at uni, I would have kept ignoring it, kept going and going until that stress bucket was just so full that there was no coming back. But from being at home, it's really helped. And some of the stuff I do, it's like at least 2 times a week, I have a massive Zoom meeting with my friends from uni and we play games or just watch a film. I've also joined Dan Monk, our skipper at the Trust, is running a fitness thing every day. So just doing that and then getting to talk to people from the Trust, and we have little social events on the side, which is quite nice. And also just having days away from everything and just giving myself, even if I just lock myself in my room for 24 hours and just have a me day, watch Netflix, stay in my pajamas, eat what I want, and then the next day it kind of just gives you that bit of lease again of, actually I can get on with the day. But you sometimes just need to take that time out, and I find that really does help with keeping up with the motivation of lockdown, because in the end it gets to what more can I do with myself, because there's only so many times you can keep doing the same thing.
How about you, Richard? How do you empty your buckets?
I think the word keeping busy is easy to say, difficult to do. I run my own company, but at the moment, everything's kind of dried up for obvious reasons. And I've found now a time to reflect, which initially really frightened me because I've never not been busy. But I found busy in other ways now, and I'm having an absolute ball. Number one, I've looked at the be kind to yourself. So stop beating yourself up about trying to hit all these objectives. And that has taken possibly 2 months for me to start going, I'll tell you what, I'm going to go for a walk every day. So I walk about 5 or 6 miles every day. And it sounds really cheesy, but I've heard birds I hadn't heard since I was a little boy, seen stuff, because I'm not in a rush to get back. Does that make sense? I'm trying to learn to juggle. I mean, I'm rubbish, but I'm trying to learn to juggle. I wonder if I can do that on a boat. Anyway, and the other thing I try to do is it's called trying something new. And it's something, if anyone comes on any boats that I run or any bits I'm with, one of our crew charter bits is that I always say everyone's got to try something new. So I thought, actually, I better start trying something new. So I've taken to try cook a quiche. Not being funny, it tastes revolting, but I'm getting there. And it's something I hadn't done before. So that in itself allows me to not think about the stuff that perhaps I've been thinking about before. And every time I try and beat myself up about something, I kind of go, you don't have to do that. It's not that bit now. And I found that really, really, really empowering, which I didn't think I'd find.
Will the quiche make an appearance on a trust trip, do you think?
Oh, you'd never say never. You never say never. I don't want to make any meal, but there we are.
Susie, how is your bucket doing?
My bucket's all right. Yeah, it's okay. So, Scott, I think I shared with you and the trust in our training. This time last year, I was also stuck in my house, not going out, but for very different reasons. And that was because I was living with generalized anxiety disorder, and I didn't want to go out. I didn't want the idea of going out. If I had to go out, I was having panic attacks. I was living with paranoia, and it was hideous. It was absolutely hideous. And I think a year ago, that gave me a lot of time to stop and think about how I was going to look after me, because suddenly I was signed off work, which I'd never done in 25 years. Like, to be signed off work, I was like, what? But I couldn't function. I couldn't do anything, and I was a mess. And it was a real moment for me to stop and think and go, right, okay, what do I need to do for me? And I don't think any of us are very good at that. And it's the great self-care. And I know that my new quote as well is around saying self-care is caring, it's not selfish. And I think we can all learn from that. And so my big coping mechanism is definitely around walking. Everything that you just said, actually, Rich. So every day at the moment, I go for a good 5-mile run and walk. I combine the two. I have my husband with me. We talk. We put the whole world to rights. So obviously, like, my new business plan didn't have COVID-19 in it, so I'm slightly panicking at the moment as I enter my new world of work and business. But hey, I'm my own boss, so I can go for a 5-mile walk and figure it out and not panic and not report to anyone, because it's only me. I've got to figure it out too. So no, the great outdoors is amazing. It's lovely. And I will confess that come Friday, 5 o'clock, red wine comes into it, and it brings me so much joy. I have Friday, 5 o'clock, and we stop Sunday evening. That's nice treats, nice food, nice wine, gin and tonics, and that's good. That gives me something to focus on. So it's good. It's all right. We'll get through it. There's hope. As long as we all know that, everyone's got hope. We'll all get through it differently. We'll all have a different story at the end of this. Some of us will share our stories. Sadly, some won't feel confident to share their stories, but hopefully the more people who do brilliant things like you guys at the Trust, who are really promoting us, talking about our mental health, fingers crossed, Scott, we will get more people sharing their story. And some of those stories won't be a joy to listen to, but there will be brilliant people who are ready to listen and support everyone around us. And I believe that that's going to change. It's going to get better.
If you are under 18 listening to this, come Friday at 5 o'clock, please stick to the orange squash rather than the wine. But that's whatever does it for you.
Absolutely. Well said, Scott. Yes.
So in the spirit of trust trips, we like to end episodes of Sound Waves with best bit, worst bit, and funniest bit as a chance to tell some trust tales. Susie, there was quite a lot of laughs during our mental health training. Could you think of a funniest bit from that?
Yes, I had the joy of it was broken up in lots of sections, but really it was probably 2 days in total. What an absolute joy and privilege to spend time with all of the Trust in a virtual world. And I was trying to think about it, and I just kept thinking of lots of funny things, which are always my rules with training. We have to have humour in there, especially when it's hard subjects. But the only two, well, there were lots. The two that came to mind was just how everyone had to keep moving through Zoom. So I kept having a funny connection where everyone would just freeze. So we got into a bit of a pattern spot where everyone had to just like keep moving and like dancing around, which for me was absolutely hilarious, watching everyone just doing these little dances while they were listening to us. And it was just a joy watching everyone's snacks. And Scott, you came in with Pringles, which you were very proud of. And yeah, I enjoyed the little competitiveness throughout the Trust as to who had the best snack through their training. But it was just a joyful 2 days, amazing stories, people shared. But yes, we laughed, we put our foot in it at times, but hopefully we all learned an awful lot as well.
Richard, we heard some worst stories so far. Frank's involved losing the keys to the sea, which was just cringe-inducing and terrible. Do you have a worst story from your time with the trust?
I've been thinking about this, and you know, I can genuinely, it just sounds so cheesy, but I generally think my worst and other people's worst are two different worsts. Does that make sense? Is that the worst part for me when we finished the trip was the fact that it was over. And it sounds cheesy, is that it's so intense. It's such a peak. And those young people that have been on our trips, and those young people are waiting to come on our trips, we can guarantee you one thing: you will laugh like you've never laughed before if you choose to. So the worst thing for me at the moment, as I'm spit around, is that I'm not getting to see any new or returning crew for this year coming. But if I spin that round, the worst bit for me is that when I do I'm not going to be able for this year, at least, to have skippers rules at Uno. That's going to be the worst bit for me. All skippers can have it, and you'll all gently learn that the only one winner at Uno is going to be the skippers, and you'll gently get that through. The worst bit for me is that I'm not going to be spending on a residential week pretty much every day absolutely taking pelters of water from everyone, where I'm so wet I get up and my fingers are as crinkly as when they go to bed. One of the worst bits for me on canal trips, now this is ironic that we've got lockdown, but going up and down locks on canal trips, you can't do the lock because you're laughing so much. Now, again, those of you that have been on canal trips, and I'm obviously reaching out to anyone that's listening to this, is that you would remember on any of the trips that we do, there's always something that we want to get across. And the worst bit for me is being able to, and I found a little photograph, which I'm just going to try and show you here if it works or not, I don't know. It's quite a famous photograph with the small boy on the big white horse, or the small child on the white horse. And the child looks and says, "Oh, we got such a long way to go." And the horse says, "But look how far you come." And for anyone that's sat here watching and waiting for their trip that's been cancelled, the worst bit for us is that we are your white horse, and that's how I see it. And yes, you've come a long way already, but we will be waiting for you, and we will wait for you to give you more best bit, worst bit, funniest bits, and get you through to look how far you've come. Worst bit for me is there we are. We've all got to just stick in and wait for next year, but it will come and it will be better.
I'm really glad Macy was on mute there, because the skipper's rules Uno thing looked a bit contentious for a moment.
That's the one thing. Every trip I go on stresses me out. And then it's like, then when I get back to say uni and I play it with my friends, I've got all these skipper rules in my head. And then I'm like, and then I whip them out at like a game at uni, and they're all like, "Well, what are you doing?" And I'm like, "But that's how we play it on the boat." And I think the worst person for that is actually Becky Ellis. She makes it up as she goes along, and you can't keep up.
Yeah.
And like,
you would hear, Macy, we all make it up as we go along.
Yeah. It's one of the funniest moments of the trip, though. It's every single night there's an Uno game happening, or just before dinner. But for me, I think I've got two like best bits. I think I've definitely got one from when I was a young person. And if you've sailed with the trust, if you're a skipper, grad volunteer, you will probably know about the chimney factory. But my skipper, when I was on my first over 18s trip, convinced me that there was a chimney showroom, and I actually proper fell for it. I spent the whole first 4 days of the 5-day trip actually believing it. I googled it up, I looked up on Google Maps. Every time we sailed past, I was like, and we were having really deep conversations with it. This was with Mark Lamble, and he proper fooled me. And it got to the 4th day, and I got it up on Google Maps again, and I was like, that's not a chimney factory, that's a oil refinery. And it was something I'd actually done in A-level chemistry. I'd had to learn about that oil refinery. So now, whoever has heard that story, it just gets passed on. Like my trip last year with the young people, the first thing my skipper told them was about how gullible I am and my chimney showroom story, and I got so much stick for it the whole week. But then I think my best bit now as a grad volunteer, because it's two very different situations when you look at it, because I always used to think it's amazing what these volunteers do, but what keeps them coming back? And I think for me, the best thing I've seen is being a grad volunteer. And that week I was with them young people, difference I could make within that week, that on the first day they came, and I picked quite a lot of them up, were on my bus for travel, and none of them would say a word to each other. They wouldn't say a word to me. And I thought, firstly, I'm just gonna, because when I'd done my first ever trip, I didn't say a word for like my first 3 trips, and now I'm a complete different person. And I thought, firstly, I'm just gonna see and let them get on with it, because it's daunting. It was a first time trip. They've all pretty much just come off a treatment. They've never been put in this scenario before. And then by day 2, I thought, I'm not having this anymore. I'm gonna make an absolute fool out myself. And I feel like that's just gonna ease it up and get everyone talking. And I think for me, at the end of that trip, seeing that, I could just make that slight difference for them. And for them, by the end of the week, having that new friendship, and they were all exchanging numbers and talking about meeting up, and seeing that, that's got to be the most rewarding thing out of the whole time I've sailed with the trip, knowing that what grad volunteers done for me and showed me that there is life after cancer, and my whole life doesn't have to be cancer, and that I'm no longer lost. Being able to see that I can do that for other young people who are in the same scenario as me has given me the best feeling in the world. And that's the thing what keeps making me want to do trip after trip now, is being able to, even if it's just, I know I'm only with them for 4 days, but giving them that little bit of hope or enjoyment, or that it's okay to talk to me, it's okay to cry, it's okay to have a laugh or make fun out of me. Then if that's getting you through your week and that's giving you a giggle, then go for it. Like, that's what got me through my trips at the beginning.
That's it for this week. I just want to give a huge thank you to Macy, Richard, and Susie, and to you as well for joining us. We have stuck the photo that Richard shared in his worst bit in the news story for this episode on our website, so do go check that out. Each episode of this Soundwaves podcast can be found hosted on our website at ellenmacarthurcancertrust.org, and we are now on Apple Podcasts and Spotify too, so please do follow and subscribe and rate us if you want to hear more from us. Until next time, take care.